Are you keen to improve your ability to play without watching your hands? Well, I found a fantastic Bach Prelude that can help us do exactly that thing. Are you sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. Hi, this is Tommy with Tommy's Piano Corner, the place for returning pianists, or indeed anybody who loves piano, to share tips and ideas of how to get the best from this great hobby. If it is your first trip here, then please do consider subscribing. Simply hit the little icon in the bottom right hand corner of your screen now, and it's all done for you. Regular viewers, of course, will know that I'm no great fan of spending a lot of my practice time doing exercises. Yeah, we have to say that quite often there are skills we'd like to be able to develop, and often the way that people will advise us to do it is to do exercise X or Y, and that will improve, this, that, or the other thing. However, personally, I think if we can find a good piece of music that enables us to practice what it is we want to improve at, then the overall experience of spending time practice every day is much, much more interesting. I think that getting better at being able to play without looking at our hands is a very important skill. And apart from anything else, we really need to be able to do that if we want to improve our sight reading, don't we? As part of my work on gaining finger independence and evenness, I found a couple of great Bach preludes that really helped me to do that because they were based on 5-finger patterns. However, I was recently introduced to Bach's D minor prelude, and it occurred to me that apart from one instance during the piece, it's actually possible to connect the entire thing in your fingers, and therefore it would make a really, really good candidate piece to work on playing without actually looking at my hands. Every single note can be connected with judicious fingering. And of course, because it's also based on a pattern, it's very good for the finger independence and evenness that I've been practicing as well. So a double whammy. In terms of the prelude itself, it's actually number 6 from the Well-Tempered Clavier Book 1. It's based on a 16th note pattern in the right hand against 8th notes in the left. One reason I love choosing real music is that whilst when we initially look at, our focus is going to be on recognising intervals in this case, both in the dots in front of us and in our fingers without looking at our hands, but afterwards it's also a very attractive piece to play in its own right, which we can't really say for most exercises. Also, you don't need to be a virtuoso to play this. Certainly, Glenn Gould plays it at a very, very brisk pace. However, Andras Schiff plays it in a much more sedate manner. Therefore, even without needing to get it up to a fast speed, it's something that will give us an excellent piece to play afterwards. Now, the reason I say we can practice this without watching our hands is that the only place where the right hand needs to jump, in fact, is here. So, by all means, for this one little jump, why not permit ourselves to have a quick glance downwards if we need to? But otherwise, we really won't need to look. Now, if you do have a tendency to memorize music, I'd advise against doing it initially, because I think by keeping our eyes focused on the printed music, we'll imprint how those intervals look in our mind's eye much better. Now, of course, whilst at a first glance the pattern in the right hand looks simple enough, you'd probably find, like me, that in fact it's far from simple. The intervals change constantly. You'll find everything from a second to a major 7th. Equally, the position changes constantly, and even the pattern itself interrupts itself by having sometimes the first and the third note of the set being the same. However, I think this is really good for stopping us from going onto autopilot, as can often happen with traditional exercises, as we need to remain really alert to the notes. Personally, I'd start working on this in fairly small segments and take simply one of them each day to work at. For me, the natural breakdown was, as you can see on the screen here. Each one of these segments has a slightly different pattern in terms of intervals, so of course spending quality time with them one at a time rather than in a much longer run I found pays dividends. The first thing we then do is carefully select our fingering. Remember, the aim of the game is to ensure we don't need to reach a note that means we actually need to move our hand position or to jump. Aside the exception we talked about, the biggest interval between any two notes is an octave. And so if our thumb is on the bottom note, then our pinky can comfortably reach the top, provided of course that we can comfortably reach an octave. The way that we can do this is by picking out where to use the pinky to bring the hand into position. We also need to take the same approach with the left hand, of course, to ensure we don't need to jump about. If we take, for example, this section, then by identifying where to use the thumb, we can ensure that the hand gets nicely into position for the following notes. I found that there were a few places where the fingering took me a while to work out, especially when I want to be able to change from 4 to 5. There's also a point in the left hand where I found you need to do a finger substitution to be able to play it without jumping. However, on the whole, I think you'll have no trouble working out something that works for you. Then once we have the fingering worked out, the next step is to work through it slowly and deliberately. We pay real close attention to the intervals on the music in front of us and to how they feel under the fingers. Because of course, an interval of a third between 1 and 3 or 2 or 4 or 3 or 5 feels very familiar. But what about the same interval between 1 and 5? And then how does it feel switching to playing that interval first with 1 and 3 and then immediately afterwards with 1 and 5? We need to take the time to recognize how it feels under the fingers. As you work slowly through the various sections, you'll come across a variety of different intervals, including intervals between black and white keys as well as between white keys. If you do struggle working out a good fingering for any particular bar, then by all means drop me a comment below and I'll let you know what I used. It may or may not work for you. Of course, we need to ensure that we're practicing good habits. Now, my last piano teacher all those years ago tried to teach me about getting more mobility into my hand. And I'll be honest, really, I didn't understand what she was trying to get through to me, as I thought that extraneous motion would be counterintuitive. So in this right hand, avoid the temptation to play just from the fingers. Get into the habit of practicing with some degree of movement in the wrist and forearm. If you're like me and you find that you quite often end up memorizing things almost by osmosis after you've repeated them enough times, then you could also think about practicing this with your eyes closed. I did try it and it's actually quite fun to do. And of course, don't forget that this is actually a piece of music, not just an exercise. And therefore, you will want to start bringing out the music as soon as you can whilst you're practicing this. And there are quite a good few places where, for example, the left hand can add a lot of interest to the basic right hand pattern. You could, for example, take this little stretch here where there's a good singing left hand pattern that you can really bring out. Have a listen to the likes of Glenn Gould or Andras Schiff play this piece. And I'm not suggesting listen so that you can copy what they do, but it'll give you some very interesting ideas of how you can really bring out the music in this particular prelude and, you know, make some notes and see what you're able to do for yourself. So have fun with it. If you're not already, then please do subscribe to Tommy's Piano Corner. Don't forget to hit that little bell icon so you're notified of new videos as and when they're released. I do thank you very much for watching and look forward to seeing you very soon.